I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus, I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus, I was evil. I never shook babies.
Cool. Yeah. Here it is.
Okay, then. Here we are.
Episode 90-something. Oh,
90-something.
91?
91, I think.
91.
Really? Only 91? I could have sworn you guys were getting close to, well, you are getting close to 100 at this point, but
Yeah.
any
We've
big
been at
plans?
We're gonna tie the knot.
I was gonna say it'd be really funny if you just did 100 and just never addressed it.
Yeah.
just went right past it.
Yeah. No, we're very. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
We've been at it. It's a definitely been
a downhill thing.
down. It's really been a
Started at the top and we worked our way
of-
down.
Waste of my time. I honestly don't know why I put up with him.
Yeah, we're
Must
just
be
like
that
an
nerd.
old married couple, and we're just like, we're just too lazy to get divorced. Like, well, we've been together for 60
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
You're like those.
Not-
You're like the couples
not
that are.
worth it.
You're the couples featured in those 1970s, 1980s like breakfast treat commercials that just can't stand each other.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then like
Came and
yeah.
look at each other during dinner, just
Yeah.
silent. There's a couple, like this well-dressed couple in some Beverly Hills restaurant that they don't even speak to each other during the meal. It's just
Yep.
wrote, yeah, it's just they go to this restaurant on Wednesdays and that's what they do.
Not to like totally derail us off the top, but I was just thinking about that as you were saying that. And I was just thinking, people have been complaining in like the right wing sphere online, like, oh, the family's falling apart and that's explaining everything. And the funny thing is, I don't necessarily fully disagree with that.
Sure.
But then I'm like thinking, well, is the trade-off what I just described, what you just described? Like, if that's the trade-off,
Yeah.
that's not
I think-
much better as far as a family structure. In fact, it's worse in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah, I think. Look, I do some family law, specifically domestic
Sure.
violence, for my job.
Okay.
Like, I see lots of couples who should not stay together. Let's just say, like,
Right,
So, like,
yeah.
so I don't think there's a one size fits all. I do
Mhm.
think there's this, like, culturally, there is an issue with too many single family households, and it's
Right.
almost like in the whole like not having kids thing is really promoted
Mhm.
by a lot of people. And that's fine. Like, no one has to have kids if you don't
Sure.
want to be a parent. But I also think a lot of this is the kind of personal decisions that you shouldn't put other people down either. And both sides do this.
Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah.
like you're just saying, I think the right wing sphere is kind of hysterical
Mhm.
in this regard. It's like, okay, you go have a bunch of children then, and they'll
Mhm.
probably be more conservative because people tend to, for the most part, take politics from their parents. Not always, some rebel, but a lot of times to grow out of that. But you are very influenced from your parents, so percentage wise, you're generally going to lean towards them. Not that all
Mhm.
parents have the same politics, but like then it's a numbers game. Like, go, like, that's fine. No one's stopping you from having children. So I don't really care what a bunch of like laptop progressives do in cities.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yeah.
That being said, there, like, I think it cuts both ways. Like, there are definitely lots of households that parents, I think, should try and stay together, at least for the children.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of proven that just multi-parent, like double parent households are better than single. Like, just doesn't, you could have two abusive, horrible parents. You have one amazing single parent, but on average, like, it will be better.
Mm.
And I'm funny you brought that up because I was thinking of a right-wing thing recently where, like, I tend to agree with a lot of right-wing stuff on culture war issues.
Sure.
Not all of them, but some I don't really care.
Their
But
diagnoses are really good. I would say their diagnoses tend to be spot on. It's just their
Yeah.
not prognosis, but their solutions.
yeah,
There's a lot of overcorrection going on.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
sure.
Yeah,
And,
but
and I think
anyway,
that's natural.
Yeah.
Some basically what I'm trying to say is, like, what happened recently though, where it was like I think like some like kind of trad wife girl was tweeting about like how men don't eat anymore. It's like men used to eat a lot and like would eat anything and eat red meat. And I commented, I'm like, yeah, they all died at 53 from heart failure. Like, yeah, they used to eat red meat and drink every night and not
smoke like chimneys.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
I want to know who this trad woman is.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know if like how old she thinks Humphrey Bogart was.
Yeah, like
in Casablanca.
Died. Yeah, they looked horrible. They died in their 50s and like or earlier. And you know, like that's not something to be celebrated. Like,
right.
I don't know. I thought that
they were real men.
Those kind of things that
they were real men. Come on.
I know. Yeah, well, not for long.
Well, it reminds me of Orson Welles for like the last, I think, couple of decades of his life.
Yeah.
His what he had for dinner every night was a steak and a bottle of whiskey. And just like that was just like
an entire bottle.
Dude, that guy was gelatinous like during the last couple of decades of his life. Like that's
there's a reason I stopped drinking for the last half of this year because I want to live longer, you know.
Yeah, man. I mean, I stopped eating. Like I changed my diet. Like I don't eat most meat anymore, and I don't know, a lot of that's like more ethical for me, and that's fine. You can make those arguments, and I guess it could be hypocrite with some of that because I do eat some meat, but it's like it's like, why do you care what other people are eating? Like, if anything, I always said when I was like very much like I would eat as much meat as possible. I barely touched carbs for like a couple of years, and all I ate was meat and vegetables, and I would love vegans because that's more meat for us. Like I didn't care that they're not taking my spot at a restaurant, you know, at a steakhouse. So I never really gave a shit about that. And I never understood why other people did.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of meat.
Jesus.
I'm always trying to come up with.
I was going to say flame broiled meat. No, that's not. Oh my God.
We can cut that out. We can cut that
out. No, I don't care.
Okay. All right. We'll see it.
Well, we're gonna talk about the Holocaust, which
hence the name.
Which, as you can see,
brave stance from
I'm taking a stance in my name on this episode on Ben.
Yeah.
Parentheses Holocaust equals bad. D'Alessio, I really want to make my
Ben. I gotta say, I'm really glad that I'm glad that
someone has to say it.
You stood up. You stood up.
I'm gonna come right out and say it. The Holocaust sucked.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna come out and say it. It was deliberate and bad.
Yeah.
And the Germans were very bad.
Yeah.
They were bad. They were not very nice.
No.
And
they were Nazi very nice. That was terrible.
I didn't go so far to say they were a bunch of jerks.
Oh, that reminds me. Have you ever seen
Norm Macdonald?
I'm going to derail us for a second. Have you ever seen the movie Tusk?
I actually haven't, but I know about it.
It is a horrific movie. Right? Yeah, it's horrific. I'm not bringing it up for those reasons. It's like this is kind of like early-ish podcasting. It came out like 2014. Yeah. So Justin Long and
Haley Joel
Osment. Yeah, they have a podcast, and they're called the Nazi Party, like NOTSEE. Like what time a girl is on the phone and Haley Joel Osment's driving, and she's like, "Yeah, it's the Nazi Party." He's like, "Spell it." They just hang up. Like the funniest part of the whole movie.
I want to say that was like really just a great time for podcasts back in the day. If you wanted to be funny and things went down. They were already kind of going downhill for a lot of people who enjoyed edgy comedy, and then it just kind of disappeared for a while. Thankfully, it's kind of come back, I would say. But I'm going to give Cumtown credit for keeping it alive.
Cumtown was amazing. I miss Cumtown.
I still like Adam Friedland's show. It's pretty good.
I try listening to it sometimes. I like Adam Friedland. I like all of. Wait, is was his name Nick?
Nick and Adam are the ones on.
Is Nick still on Adam Friedland show?
It's
just Stav left.
Also,
Cumtown is just the greatest name of a podcast ever. They came and say it in like New York Times articles.
And they were making over $1 million a year on Patreon. Like,
were they really?
Oh yeah.
Why would Stav leave?
That's like a whole thing that I remember listening to him talk about, and it was just like it just sounded like he just couldn't do it anymore. And I'm thinking, you know what? Don't ruin the show by staying around.
It was the least effort. Low effort podcast I've ever listened to.
Yeah.
No effort at all. It was just they just call Adam gay like 50 times an episode. Where when I first started listening to Come Town, I honestly thought Adam was gay because they just called him it so much, and he never fought. He never said anything back. He was like, "Yeah, I know."
He would occasionally be like, "Yeah, I hook up with girls," and it just sounded like cope, you know. And then
his girlfriend was Dasha Nekrasova.
Yeah. Oh
Red
yeah,
Scare.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
and now she's the most performatively Catholic person of all. So you know,
they had to tone. I do love Red Scare. It's one of my favorite.
They're
one of my favorite podcasts, and they brought up where like they would say on the show, like, I'm not going to talk about Catholic shit. They went like a string where she was like really hard into it, and people were like, you got to stop.
Yeah,
like you don't even. It's too much.
Yeah, well, it's like if you started losing money, which they might have. I didn't look into that, but that actually might have been the motive for that.
Yeah, I mean, when she started going on about like the Pope being the Antichrist, it's like, you're in way too deep here.
Yeah,
like,
what's that? Oh, that is like a type of Catholicism. What is that called? It's not.
Yeah, talked about it.
I'm just gonna make it up and call it dispensationalism. That's not what it is, but it's something like some crazy.
I thought someone's an A. Like,
yeah.
Not Anabaptist, but I don't know.
Animalism. I don't remember.
No.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Catholics died in the Holocaust too.
Yeah, that's true. They did.
I actually
Hitler
visited
was Catholic.
Who?
Hitler was Catholic too, wasn't he?
No, he
Well, he was raised in
well,
a Catholic house, right?
Hitler was.
Well, Austria is very Catholic, so he might have been like raised Catholic. But dude, the Nazis were like, they were into a lot of the occult shit. Like they kind of used Catholicism to, because Bavaria, Southern Germany, and Austria was like very Catholic, so kind of used it that way. But I think, I mean, you even say in your article, Alex, about like they like loved Islam in some ways and like occult shit. And
the swastika came from like Hinduism, wasn't it?
Yeah, Hinduism.
Well, funny enough, actually, the swastika is a global shape, and I'm not. I mean, it literally can be found on every continent except probably Antarctica. Though I'm sure conspiracy theorists would say, no, they're all under the ice sheet now.
The backwoods of Oregon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but yeah, there's swastikas all over Asia, but you know, the Hindu swastika is the big one, and that is really where they derived it from.
And then they just went like Photoshop, and they just kind of like
exactly
they flipped it. I have a story about that actually.
Sure.
I'm from North Jersey, and so a big Jewish population. And my boss, I worked at a liquor store, like a wine liquor store for years, and he was Hindu. Honestly, like one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he when he moved to New Jersey, his family, like something that you do is you would like put the swastika like on your house. So they had like swastikas on their house, like the Hindu ones, obviously. Yeah. But like people don't know that. Like you see it, it's jarring. It's like they don't know. It's like, oh no, it's the reverse way. It's totally cool. It's like, no, they're fucking and it's like Parsippany, New Jersey. Yeah. And they're like, and they thought they got in trouble. Like, well, not in trouble, but they got attention, called themselves. They'd explain all of that. And this was like, now I feel like a lot more people know that the swastika is kind of more multicultural, like other cultures use it, and it has been appropriated by the Nazis. And but this was back in probably like the 80s or 90s, like early 90s maybe. So it was a lot more of like people just thought that was understandable.
Well, in the 80s was like a period of time because like people. It's funny. It's just I'm just like, yeah, I've looked at neo-Nazism quite a bit, and that just sounds weird to say out loud, but it's true.
You've done your research.
I've done my research. And actually,
attended a few meetings.
Yeah, exactly. I went to a few meetings. I'm on a few lists for books I've ordered online. But there is an element of sort of dark truth about the swastika appropriation, in that there really was a lot of talk of, for lack of a better term, master race in parts of Hinduism, even before the Nazis were around.
Oh, you mean the culture that has the caste system?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's the thing. That's the thing. When people say there's this little factoid people love to point out, is that Nazis who were imprisoned in Texas, POWs, were shocked at how black prisoners were treated. And I have not looked into that, so I can't confirm or deny it. But I'm just thinking, well, whether or not they thought that, you know, America was bad, they liked the Hindu caste system, and a lot of the Hindus in the upper caste, the Brahmin, really liked the Nazis. I don't like throwing him under the bus, but the Hindu nationalist leader that wasn't Gandhi, Subhash Chandra Bose, he was very much allied with the Nazis for a while, though he had a lot more self-respect than their Islamic ally from Palestine, which is Hashim al-Husseini, who I've talked about a lot in my quote-unquote Muslim Nazi series. And you know, that title is relatively ironic, but when it comes to Hashim al-Husseini, it's not ironic at all. He was just a straight up Nazi, just in party affiliation. But like he
had a common enemy, I guess, in a way.
Right, but it was so much deeper than that with him. Like he just hated Jews. He hated Jews probably even more than a lot of Nazis did. And what's really sad and tragic about that whole story is how there was kind of historical forces that put him in that position. But the more I've read about it, the more I've come to realize that, no, it was much deeper than just sort of the fact that Zionism was on the rise when he was, you know, politically active.
He was in Palestine?
Yeah, he was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem.
I remember reading Hitler really liked, I forget his name, one of the Alis of, I think it was Egypt, but he was Albanian. So, and he had like light skin and blue eyes and red hair. And
Hitler you're talking about that? No, that's Hashim al-Husseini.
Oh, that
was him. Yeah. That was him.
Was he Albanian though?
No, he had he spent a lot of time in the former Yugoslavia, which is what my current series that's coming out is all about right now. We haven't caught back up to him yet talking about him, but yeah, he was very active in the Bosnian Muslim community there, trying to get them on board with the Nazis. But that whole region is just a complete nightmare of, it's like a nightmare of a clusterfuck, I like to call it. It's just completely bananas and impossible to describe. You know, even just if you gave me like an hour, I could maybe do it, but I think we wouldn't get to any of the topics at hand if I did that. But my point of going back to the Hindu thing is this guy Bose, unlike al-Husseini, he saw through Hitler's racism immediately. He was just like, you don't look at me as an equal, but I need you, essentially. And he found a lot more luck with the Japanese. And there's like a whole series of battles that happened in India and in sort of South Asia between American troops and Hindu nationalist troops and Japanese troops that people don't really know about. Dan Carlin talked about it briefly in
who did the Hindus fight for?
They fought for the Axis. The nationalists did. They weren't like, it was confusing because in India, they were under the purview of the British, obviously. So British troops were Indian as well, but there were Hindu nationalists fighting them and fighting with the Japanese against the Americans.
Yeah, it seems like that's probably more of a, you know, well, we don't like the British, and these guys are fighting the British, so this could be our ticket out of here. Right.
I give Bose a lot more credit than I give the Arab nationalists of the time, the Hindu nationalists, I mean, because also the Hindu nationalists gave us Gandhi, who wasn't a great guy on every front of his life, but he definitely was, you know, an icon of 20th century history for good reason.
Yeah, he was in the Apple commercial. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, there's that letter that letter always circulates, I feel like, on the internet where he like wrote to Hitler. And
that's the big one. Yeah, but there's
hey, take a chill.
Yeah, there's so many other people that like corresponded with Hitler that people should be getting mad about too. You know what I mean? Like
spill the tea.
Yeah, spill the tea. Well, like al-Husseini comes to mind. Like
Time Magazine.
Time Magazine, Man of the Year is the big one. Yeah. Like there's all these like people who, and this kind of brings up a question that's fundamental to the core of talking about the Holocaust, which is like, how much do we really blame the world for not knowing or not caring? And on the one hand, I think when you're talking about regular people, including a lot of Germans, they did know, but they also didn't know to a certain degree. They knew more than I think a lot of them would admit right after the war for obvious reasons, but there was a lot of them who didn't know. And a lot of the like Americans didn't know. And there is this, this actually is another essay I wrote a while ago at this point in response to Ken Burns's documentary about the Holocaust in the United States. And it was this, like, I don't think a man's tongue could fit so far up Franklin Delano Roosevelt's ass until I saw that documentary, because he not only takes Franklin Roosevelt off the hook when he shouldn't be, but he basically lies and says that Franklin Roosevelt did all he could to save Jews in the Holocaust when he actively went out of his way not to. And he ended up being like just letting his anti-Semitic colors show. I mean, this actually kind of ties into the other thing we were going to talk about, but he was the reason, like the main reason, I would argue, that Harvard had its racial quotas in the 1920s that kept Jews out. That was Roosevelt. And it was all because they were Jews. He saw them as overrepresented and too powerful in, you know, American culture. So he wanted them to have less influence.
Yeah, I do know. I wrote like my final paper or whatever in law school on like refugee resettlement. And that's like really like the UN refugee, kind of the whole apparatus stems from like a boat that came to America full of Jews fleeing, you know, Nazi.
Yeah, the
Nazi
USS St.
Germany.
Louis.
Yeah, the St. Louis, right. And we turned it back. And then I think they all died. Or
it was like all but like a couple dozen were
and
killed.
It was
at
like
Auschwitz.
It was like they were right here. Like we could have taken them, and like that whole concept really comes from that moment. The whole like refugee resettlement concept comes from that moment. Have you been to a concentration camp?
Believe me, it's the first place. Again, this just sounds so weird out of context, but it's the first place I'm going when I actually do manage to get to like Germany, Poland, and so forth. I do want to go because I've never been to Germany before, but at this point, it's overdue, I would say.
I've been to Dachau, and it's not fun. It's definitely like sobering, and you do learn. Like one thing I learned a lot of was like, yes, it was obviously lots of Jews, but also like a lot of other people they memorials for. Like they had a whole like even like Protestant memorial, Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, obviously Slavs, disabled people. But it was really like disturbing, and just like the emptiness and hollowness of it. So just kind of be prepared for that. Because I also was I was like traveling with a big group, not of friends. I was with one friend, and I give us a lot of credit. We were very respectful. I'm not just saying that because I don't know, like maybe Holocaust stuff is just like very, at least where we're from in North Jersey. Like we had a big trip growing up in school was like to go to the Holocaust Museum in DC. Holocaust survivors would speak at my school. You know, like seeing their tattoos and everything. Like they were like the great grandparents of people who lived in Newark or New York City, and then moved out to the suburbs. And so we kind of knew what we were in for, but like we're with a lot of Australians, and I rip on Australians a lot on this podcast. We're like just very disrespectful, and it was just like kind of something to do during the day. And it was like very weird to me that like you're being kind of obnoxious.
Just go tell them to like
concentration camp.
I'd be like, go eat a fucking kangaroo. Get the hell out of here. What's wrong with you?
It was very weird, but I do recommend going. I think. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Auschwitz would probably be even more horrific.
Right. You should get back at them and like wipe your ass on like the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I do have a friend, a fellow American friend living in Sydney. I should ask him to do that.
Yeah, would you? Thank you.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Is not all terrible, but Australians aren't the best.
I don't know. I mean, I think Joe might agree with me. They're kind of taking everybody's job here in Hollywood.
Oh my God.
For a long time.
Get them out. Taking our jobs.
People complaining about Mexicans here. No, man, it's the Australians. They really are the worst.
They snuck over.
Yeah, because they're always better looking. They're always taller. They're always like able to do multiple accents. I mean, like they just have to show us up constantly here. So I actually did an early episode I did in History Impossible was about Dachau. Actually, it was about the liberation of it and how that's actually like an ugly epilogue to Dachau, which is already, as you were saying, essentially an ugly ass story. Yeah. But the liberation of Dachau was just as ugly and kind of represented this moment of like lost innocence on the part of American soldiers and loss of control. Have you guys seen Shutter Island?
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember the flashback where he talks about how they get to Dachau and they see all the corpses and then they lined up all the troops and then machine gun them?
I don't remember that. It's been years since I did it.
It's a brief scene, but it's sort of central to the DiCaprio character's trauma. And that actually happened. Like that's the story that I ended up covering was, and it's this, I think it's actually dramatized in another movie or series on Netflix, the name of which is escaping me, but it was like this it was like a rotoscoped animated World War II series. And it was, and it ends with that story too. And it was just this moment where there were some guys one of the ringleaders was from the East Coast. I want to say he was from Boston, so you can get your jokes in there, Ben, if you want. but they just pulled these Germans to their feet, threw them against the wall, and then machine gunned them. And on the one hand, and it just presented for me when I heard that story, it's such a weird moral problem for me, because on the one hand, I'm like, well, did these guys who got executed have it coming? Did they kind of have it coming? Yeah, they were complicit in one of the worst crimes against humanity ever. And you can't blame American soldiers for losing their shit when they see how cruel their enemy was. Like they've been fed propaganda for years at that point that the Germans were evil. Then they finally see what the extent of that evil is. It's going to get to a lot of them, especially those who've already lost friends and, been going through the ringer, really. But at the same time, they completely lost control. They were acting unbecoming of a military force that's there to liberate the people. And they basically executed a good couple dozen enemy combatants who had surrendered extrajudicially. And that in of itself is wrong. It basically invalidates things like Nuremberg. If you're going to, excuse that, you can't say that Nuremberg was the right thing to do, because you might as well just execute all of them without a trial if you believe that what happened was okay.
I don't even know where to start with that, because you can obviously you made kind of both arguments, and I could argue for or against either. You can't sit here in 2023 or even back home in California or New Jersey and say you shouldn't have done that. It's like these guys are dodging fire and bombs and haven't seen their families, and they're fighting this literal war machine, and then they get honestly the perfect excuse. Like if you ever have carte blanche to murder people, it's like this.
They literally caught them red-handed at that point. Yeah.
That being said, are they killing some to take a step back? One thing as I've gotten older, and I said this before to Joe, you watch what I loved about All Quiet on the Western Front from last year and maybe this is just me getting older. I'm in my early 30s now. Is how young these soldiers were. These were children.
Yes.
A lot of them were fucking children. And it's that who they lined up against the wall and shot.
I mean, it was all sorts of people. I mean, that's the thing. It's I've heard arguments be made, and of course it's always on Reddit, but I've heard people say, well, a lot of them were SS. And I'm thinking, you guys don't even realize what the SS wasn't. If you're talking about the SS in the 30s, you are talking about the evilest of the evil, true believing racist Nazi bastards. Yes, that is true. But the SS included random conscripts and volunteers in Bosnia. That's what I've been studying lately. These are just people. The SS just expanded over time. And I don't even think that that's a good argument, because again, it's like what you're saying. These people are from varied backgrounds. It's the end of the war. It's like they are just being stationed at this place when the cause is already lost, they're not trying to and if they desert or they don't carry out their duties, they'll just get a pistol to the back of their head. Yeah.
It's really, it is a good moral exercise. It's something that should be debated, and something that could be in some sort of ethics class in college, which I'm sure would go swimmingly. But because if it's literally punch Nazis, extrajudicially shoot Nazis in the head, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think it's easy to say no, you should let the judicial system play out and justice will prevail. I think it's very easy to say, and I'm a fucking lawyer. I think it's very easy to say when people walk up on piles of emaciated corpses
of children. They're dead children.
Of children. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they get a pass.
Yeah.
Maybe those soldiers get a pass. I don't know.
I might have told this story before on the show, but there was a Marvel Comics artist named, it was a really cool name. His name is Jack Kirby.
Oh yeah.
And he co-created Captain America back in the 40s. And he's the one who drew the famous issue that featured. It was just before the U.S. got into World War II, that featured Captain America punching Hitler, and it was actually a controversial cover because at the time we weren't in the war, and there were fair number of Nazi sympathizers in the U.S. I guess because we're quite aware of.
Yeah, they filled Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, the Bund. Yeah, the Bund. They were a charming bunch. Yeah,
but so there was a crowd of protesters outside of. At the time, they weren't called Marvel Comics. I think they were called Atlas or Timely Comics. But they eventually became Marvel Comics. But there was a crowd of protesters, of Nazi sympathizers outside the building, and they're all calling for Jack Kirby to come out and whatever. And then the owner of the building came in and he said, "Hey guys, no one leave the building. I've called the police. No one leave until we've dispersed the crowd." But Jack Kirby was Jewish, and he was a real tough guy. And so there's this little story about how he kind of was like, "Nah, fuck that." So he rolled up his sleeves so he could quote unquote sort them out. And so I guess he just went down and just kind of beat up all these Nazi sympathizers. And then after creating Captain America and after beating up all these Nazi sympathizers, he ended up getting drafted into World War II. And it's funny, like this is actually kind of interesting. So because of his artistic background, he was used in the war to like draw maps.
That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I did not know that. Yeah.
Stan Lee as well, from Marvel Comics. He was drafted he was in World War II as well, but he was used for write because he was a writer, just write pamphlets for soldiers, like when you're overseas, what plants are edible and what happens if you get a STD in a different country. And
interesting,
but it's interesting. We're like, hey, so you're not really a tough person, but we'll use whatever skills you have. So it's like you're an artist, so draw maps for missions. It's
smart.
You're a writer. It's like, well,
it's because other culture like China famously would just have everyone start making steel in their backyard
and by melting down their walks.
It's crazy shit.
And
they start at least we made people do shit, but it was like, well, what are you good at? And we'll have you do that for the cause. And I think it's better.
But that's the thing, though, is that arguably, and this isn't a criticism, I think that's an amazing thing. Because I didn't know that about Kirby or about Stan Lee. In fact, I honestly thought that they were too young to be in World War II, which makes no sense because Stan Lee was 102 when he died, the other year. So, But the thing that I just think is so crazy too is that if you're doing that, you're not really preparing these people to see something like the Holocaust. If Stan Lee or Jack Kirby, even Jack Kirby, who sounds like basically a comic book drawing version of Bugsy Siegel, who was literally doing the same thing as him. He was leading Jewish mobsters and toughs through downtown New York City to beat up Nazis at Madison Square Garden. It was that event, and they started a big war between them, a street war. But you put guys as tough as Jack Kirby at the gates of Dachau or Auschwitz. They wouldn't be at Auschwitz, that was the Russians. But regardless, you put them at the gates of Dachau. I can't imagine he would be okay after that. I would imagine he'd probably have the same impulse as the Bostonian guy who basically was in a lot of ways responsible for what happened there. It's a very complex story, like you were saying, Ben, how that's sort of like an ultimate morality play. And I wish they would put that to students, especially high school students and undergrad students. I was saying before we were recording, but the reason I'm called Join the Dark Side is I just started grad school in history, and it saddens me, but I don't know if I would be able to even have that debate in my school. As cool as my school is, it's super not what people think of when they think of elite colleges these days, because it's not an Ivy League or a tiny liberal arts college. But there still is this sense that I'm getting that I don't think a lot of people in that class would want to have that conversation. Or at least they would, or they would expect it to go a certain way, and it might not, especially if I'm in the room.
A lot of people would probably have the knee-jerk reaction of yes, absolutely. They yes, kill them. But those same people that if you put forth any person on death row, right? I actually went through the list of death row inmates in America last year.
How many do we have at this point?
A lot. There's a good amount. It's a handful of states, really, or it's Texas, Georgia, Florida. Not even really Florida. It's Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma, California. Actually, has a ton. Because they're not executing anyone, so they go to death row, but then they just sit there forever. California's the worst example of the death penalty. It's you have it, people go on death row, but you don't use it. I am actually against the death penalty, but that's not here nor there. So it's so then they just cost all of the money and all the appeals and all of that. and then there's not the satisfaction of the victims, who victims do a lot of times get some say in whether the prosecution's gonna pursue the death penalty, not always, yada yada. But
yeah, we're the best at getting the worst of both worlds.
Yes,
yeah,
well, that's California.
That's California.
So,
the best at getting the worst of both worlds should be the state motto at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I did this. Why? I didn't do this for fun. I did this because I wanted to see, well, who is on death row? Like what did they do? And I almost positive every single person I saw, I didn't get through all of them, but everyone I saw, maybe 99% of them, had at least murdered one person. Murdered someone. Yeah. Most with aggravating charges like rape and other sorts of things. But they all took a life. And I guarantee you the same people who would argue they could kill the Nazis, even if they were like an 18-year-old who got thrust in there from some farm in Bavaria, was to go, your turn at Dachau to hold the rifle. I guarantee you they would say you shouldn't murder or you shouldn't kill this serial rapist who murdered a family of 3, even though a jury of their peers found them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of all the evidence. And the good professor would bring up something like that.
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't know, like, I honestly don't know, because I'm against the death penalty for my own reasons. We don't have to go into the whole death penalty argument. But I also have that same knee-jerk reaction. It's like that soldier, let's say for argument's sake, didn't kill a single one of those people, didn't point a gun at them, didn't even lead them into a shower at bayonet point. Right?
Dachau didn't even have gas chambers.
They didn't have gas chambers?
I'm pretty sure they didn't have gas chambers. So they weren't a death camp the way Auschwitz.
No, I know they weren't. I know they weren't a death camp. Yeah, they were a work camp.
Well, continue your point. I'll fact check myself while you're continuing your point, just to be safe.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I thought I was in a gas chamber. I don't know. Maybe not. But like, for argument's sake, let's say he was just there, part of the system, right? Part of literal white supremacy. I guarantee you a lot of those students would argue, and maybe they would change their minds after the professor made the point I just made. But I think that's something to grapple with. Like, well, why do you feel this way about these people, and not about, even if the murderer was a white supremacist? A lot of white people are on death row. Like white supremacists are on death row who, let's say, murdered a Mexican family or a black family and raped their children. And like, I guarantee you there's some of those on death row. Yeah,
absolutely. And just to update listeners, viewers, there was a gas chamber at Dachau. Not like, it wasn't like a death camp, and it was used for execution of individual prisoners. They did do a couple mass killings in it. The more horror that I remember learning about Dachau was less the gas chamber, or the killing rather, and more about the medical experimentation that went on there, because that was another one of the places that did that. They were lucky in the sense that they didn't have to deal with Dr. Mengele, but it was still, what happened to a lot of Jews there was unconscionably evil. So
I came up with a podcast. So in October, can we do an episode on like the history of human experimentation? I think that'd be good, or like good Halloween.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. I do have a book called Inhuman Experiments that I have avoided reading. Yeah, it's well, I mean, because then you start talking about Unit 731 over in China, like on the Japanese experimentation on humans, which is in some ways worse than what the Nazis did. So,
yeah, there's that movie, is like The Men Behind the Sun, I think, where it's a series of it sounds like the original torture porn.
I hate that shit, man.
I was gonna say I saw it, and I actually, in an old podcast I did, I watched it with my co-host and reviewed it. Really? And I hate to say, I mean, that podcast is gone. No one can find it at this point. But I feel bad saying it, but the movie was really bad. It's it's not very well made. It's very low budget, and as horrific as the events in that movie are, they're kind of comical and how they're portrayed. But the thing is, when you know the history behind it, it still hits really hard and awful. But human experimentation is something that, unfortunately, that really gets into the realm of like, well, we got to really start blaming America for that. Like, that absolutely is the fault of the American eugenics movement. Like that. Whoa. It's very much, at least the German form. I can't speak to the Japanese form where they got their ideas from, but human experimentation came from the American eugenics movement, advocated by figures like Madison Grant, who was a personal friend of FDR, by the way. And it's it's a very dark story that really didn't end until like midway through the 20th century. There's the famous case of Carrie Buck. I don't know if you ever heard about that in law school, Ben. It's a famous Supreme Court case.
Yeah, I think it's Buck v. Bell.
Yeah, but no, maybe. Actually, I don't remember the name of the case. It was 1921, I want to say.
I think it's Buck v. Bell. Let me see.
Yeah. Well, it was about not euthanasia, but it was about sterilization.
Eugenics. Yeah, Buck v. Bell.
Okay, yeah, it was a sterilization case, and it's a horrific story. And
yeah, it was Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Yeah, that lovely man.
You don't like him?
I just consider him. I mean, it's funny. I'm kind of like, okay, on the one hand, I see what he did with Fire in a Crowded Theater as a bad thing, but I'm also kind of
that's dicta.
That's
okay. Dicta. Oliver, that'll like.
Please correct me on this. Yeah.
No, it's not correcting you. It's correcting the world. Like everyone brings, because like not anti-free speech people who like always push back against free speech arguments are always like, well, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. It's like that's not part of the opinion.
Yeah.
Actually, that's dicta in law. A opinion that. Where a Supreme Court justice, actually this could segue into our next topic if we want, but a Supreme Court justice or a judge or whoever, when they kind of just like say stuff that like might have to do with something, it's like kind of a thought, it's not part of the opinion, like that's called dicta, it has no holding.
Gotcha.
So that was like a thought that he had, but it wasn't part of the opinion. That's similar what happened recently with Clarence Thomas during the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which is I'm totally blanking on the Dobbs decision.
Yeah.
He said something like he kind of flirted with the idea of getting rid of then gay marriage and miscegenation, which is hilarious.
Right.
He married a white woman.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But like he's kind of said something, right? But it wasn't part of it.
That.
It wasn't holding in any part of the opinion. It had nothing to do with that case. It was just kind of like saying something. It doesn't happen all the time, but that is one of the most famous misquotes of a Supreme Court decision.
Well, the one thing that I always point to people, with people who use that point, I see. Well, now I have another arrow to put in my quiver there, I guess, and act like I know what I'm talking about and that I went to law school. But the one I always point to is just saying that has nothing to do with where free speech is at now, legally speaking. That's all under Brandenburg v. Ohio. And that is literally just what is it? It's like imminent intent or something. I'm getting the wording wrong. But
it's like a two-part.
Right.
It's imminent danger.
Yes.
And intent. I believe those are the two.
It's like immediate imminent threat, essentially, and it's like probably. I can't imagine a better for like free speech protection, legally speaking. I can't think of anything like that's about as far as I'd be willing to go with accepting it. Like I feel like as gross as it is, you should be allowed to make threats at people as long as they're not imminent. That's why internet threats don't really bother me all that much because, like, what are you going to do? I think that you can treat doxing as an imminent threat. But
I don't think doxing's free speech.
No, I don't think so either, though. Well, this is just a question. Is there any law against doxing in the United States? Because I keep hearing back and forth on that, just hearing people saying it one way or the other, and I just don't have any concept of if it is or not. I think it shouldn't be, but legal, but I just have no sense of if it actually is or not.
I don't know if there's like a criminal statute and like a state code that would be against like that they could bring a charge of doxing. Like I don't think so. I think this is more, I think we're talking more of here because when a lot of times people talk about free speech, they're kind of like meshing things like criminal action versus like getting kicked off a platform. And where it's like doxing, to me, I don't necessarily think you should be like charged with a crime for doxing, but to me, that is a reason to like kick someone off of a platform. Like those are different things where we're like both saying a threat to someone or saying something mean to someone is like shouldn't give you a criminal charge or kicked off a platform, right? Where putting up child porn should get you kicked off the platform and criminally charged. Like, so there's like, it's kind of that same thing that a lot of times people just kind of like mesh together. And the argument that like the bad faith argument that's always made, it's like, oh, well, Twitter's not the government. It's like, well, actually, fucking kind of it is when you look at what's coming out.
I was gonna say,
but like that's not the point. Like you want to have a, don't make me go get my free speech book and read the Nelson Mandela quote. But you want a culture of free speech. It's like like things bleed into other things. We saw that with the Twitter files. Like you want to have kind of this. It's the same values and principles, even if it's not like the exact same. I don't know, like result. Like, yeah, okay, here the government isn't the one who's stopping the speech or compelling the speech even, but it's the same concept. Like, and that I think is more of what the argument comes down to, that, you know, bad faith people just be like, oh, well, you know, that doesn't matter. It's not the government stopping you.
Yeah. Well, and see, whenever I hear, I mean, this came up at least when the Twitter files thing was happening, where like I actually heard arguments against what things being reported by guys like Taibbi and Schellenberger and so on. Like, I heard arguments being made that that we're basically resting on the premise that the government has no reason to try to chill speech online. And that, to me, like, I don't know, I've never read a book that, you know, backs this up. It just doesn't make any sense to me from a perspective of incentive. The state has every incentive to minimize the amount of free speech an individual citizen has. They have every incentive to do that and no incentive to keep it open. Like, I mean, if they believe in their own cause, like that's the one incentive. If you believe in your own state's cause or values, then sure, you could call that an incentive, but the incentive of the state is to keep the state functioning. Like, and the state has a harder time functioning if, you know, its citizens aren't, you know, falling in line, one would think. Now, maybe there's probably way more articulate ways to put that are out there. I've never read them. It just strikes me as a silly proposition that the state has no reason to want to tamp down on, you know, people's speech.
I think that's a historical argument, right? And just like a very, like, giving the government the I don't know, what am I trying to say? Like, just giving them the most credit, I guess. Yeah. Like undue credit that the U.S. government should ever receive. Like, of course, especially when you're like Maine, you kind of look at the government as a uniparty. Like, yes, I think that they argue about like cultural issues a lot, and actually do like disagree on a lot of them. When it comes to the main shit, when it comes to like giving tax breaks to people, like to rich people, to war, to corporate, you know, keeping corporations happy and the donor base happy, like they're the exact same. Right? Oh yeah. And so when you look at it that way, when you kind of have that perspective, like, yeah, of course they want to quell free speech. Of course they wanted to discredit people who are questioning, like asking legitimate questions about like, where did this virus come from? Or is there an incentive for, you know, these people to be locked down and to have pharmaceutical companies make all this money because maybe the TV channel that is promoting your political campaign is advertising with, you know, that pharmaceutical company. Is really not that hard to understand. So
yeah, I mean, I just saw this quote somewhere on Twitter, but I think it was from someone famous or important, but it was something like, you know, no government wants
Vendalesio. It was famous and important, so I figured.
Oh yeah. It was like, you know, like no government wants its people to be too intelligent.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of tying into that thing where it's like, yeah, it's a lot easier to pass laws when you have fewer people questioning them, debating them, and knowing too much, and reading the fine print. It's much easier that, you know, to keep them obedient.
Yeah, right. And I think, you know, obedience a key word there too, because I think this is tough for me, because on the one hand, you can't just say that obedience in and of itself is bad. Because if you say that, then you really are in a state of nihilism where everybody can do whatever they want, whatever makes them feel good, and you could excuse anything. But on the other hand, you got to ask the question, obedient to what? And because like that actually, it's really funny to me that, you know, I just came up with like, you know, the hypothetical essentially, but like it did actually happen. I did see people saying that, making the argument that why would the government lie, or why would the government want to control like what people say and where? And I'm just thinking, you would have no problem believing that the government was this white supremacist institution that maintained slavery for like half a century, we'll say. Like, why can you believe that that government would do that, but that the same government, even though many years later, wouldn't do something that is also just as inhumane? Well, it's not just as inhumane, but that has nothing to do with the freedom and dignity of individual people. Right. Like they would make the argument, well, we're different now than we were then. And to that, I'd say, no, we're not.
No, how about they've lied about everything,
right?
Literally everything.
We just happen to luck out in pointing out that when they lied, you know, like we've caught them a couple times.
Like every fucking thing that has happened, they've lied about. Like, like pick a thing, pick a moment in time. I'll tell you how the government lied about it.
I think a lot of people believe, because they just don't read history, they believe that after Watergate happened, the government never lied again. It's like, they got caught, so they never did that again.
Watergate is so adorable now. Like when you look back at Watergate, I watched All the President's Men recently.
I love
that was very important.
It feels so quaint.
It's like so quaint. It's like, oh, you spied on each other.
Yeah.
You're all spying on us all the time now.
And weren't both both campaigns, both in 2016 and 2020 were doing things like that, just not as overtly. They weren't bugging each other's headquarters. That's the difference.
You don't have to do that anymore.
Exactly.
I thought it was like a very much like, oh, that's sweet.
It was more like, I think a better way to look at Watergate is that it was less akin to catching the bad guys in the act, like as sort of like a singular moment, and more like, no. This is how the sausage is made. I don't know what, it's just that this is Nixon, and Nixon wasn't known for subtlety. So right. Like
Nixon was a very interesting character.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I like he's very sympathetic, but then he's also like kind of evil. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
He's very strange. And I think, so Watergate, he won that election by like a ton.
Like 49 states won, or he won.
Like he was gonna win. Like it was also, Watergate was the most ridiculous. Like you had this in the bag.
Yeah,
you had no reason to cheat. You were gonna you had the biggest landslide victory of all time. I think
the only one bigger was Reagan in '84. Reagan won. Okay. Reagan won 49 states. He only lost Minnesota because Minnesota is where the other candidate was from.
Mondale or
Humphrey.
Oh, Humphrey.
Or was it Mondale? Shit,
I always get them confused because they're both
I'm from Minnesota and I get them confused. So don't worry.
Yeah,
about
it's true.
Yeah.
There was
Minnesota hasn't gone red in forever.
Did either of you guys ever read Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail? 72.
I love that book.
I want to.
It's so good. Ben, you would love it. But there was a part where I think Thompson is interviewing some people from Nixon's re-election campaign, and I think one of them was trying to start a rumor about George McGovern, about like how he fucks like farm animals or something like that. And then somebody said something like, well, the American public will never believe that rumor. And he goes, oh, I don't care if they believe it. I just want to watch him deny it. And it's
we laugh, but that really that kind of mentality has really poisoned the discourse, unfortunately. As much as we love it, I think we all love it, but it's like it's like one of those things where I'm just like, okay, can it just be Thompson who did it, and then we agree to just never do shit like that again? It's just because that's who he was. He was a character. He was a man of his moment, and we should just accept it.
It wasn't Thompson though, right?
No, it was someone from Nixon's campaign.
Yeah.
Oh, I misunderstood.
They were trying to start a rumor about George McGovern.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Thompson, and also talk about our discourse. I was just listening to this recently, and of course I saw it live. Trump did this shit in 2015, 2016. He would just be like, Marco Rubio has a small penis.
Yeah.
Like he would just like look at his hands, like, you know what that means, and like Marco Rubio would have to deny, but can't say I don't have a small penis, but I had to, like, that's what fucking happened.
Yeah. I know.
It's such a sleazy thing where it's like they use up valuable airtime denying stupid rumors that nobody believes anyway. But it's like, the reporter asked about it, so I gotta defend it.
Well, it's funny you talk about like close elections too. That like people were acting like 2016 and 2016 and 2020 were like, well, not so much 2020, but like 2016, supposedly the narrative was that it was by the skin of his teeth Trump won because Hillary Clinton had 40 million more popular votes or something. I don't remember what the number was.
She had almost 3 million.
3 million. Oh, no, I'm thinking about the total numbers. Yeah, my brain is mush today. But like, I hear that, and then I think back to the story of the election of 1876. That election was no, it was Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden, and Rutherford B. Hayes won by one electoral vote.
Whoa,
really?
It was a whole thing.
That sucks, man.
It was
for Tilden. I don't know the fucking guy.
I was gonna say, yeah. No, it was literally the closest race. I think it was the closest race in American political history, and it ultimately turned in. It set the stage for things like the Chinese Exclusion Act later on down the line. It was not a good election, but. Yeah, the Tilden Rutherford B. Hayes election is a very interesting story. There's a couple books that have been written about it. I talked about it in actually my very first episode I ever did, and it was very interesting, but I didn't dwell on it. But I really want to go back to it. Maybe next year, close to the election or something. I'll do an episode about that, because I don't think we're ever going to have an election that close ever again, because it was getting to the point where like no one was conceding. Both sides were claiming victory, obviously. But the thing is, it wasn't like Trump claiming victory in 2020 versus Biden. It was like, it wasn't delusion. It was like, actually, these people were like, well, yeah, we won, because they thought they did. It was that close. And then it got to the point when there was no agreement. I don't think inauguration happened until April or May of that year of 1877. And when it was like getting to the 11th hour, the head of the military was saying about, oh God, who was the outgoing president? I want to say it was Grant, but I'm not very good at this off the top of my head. But regardless, the previous president was out, the new one was in, and the head of the military said, if he gives me any orders after this date, this deadline for, one of these guys conceding, I'm not going to follow any of their orders. We could have had like a sort of impromptu military coup. Only like 10 years after the Civil War ended.
That's what we needed.
Yeah. Well, honestly, maybe we did back then. I don't know. It wasn't a great time. But I think like people don't have any concept of how bad things have been before when they talk about how bad things are now. But with that said, I don't think things are great now. I'm actually much more cynical than I used to be about it. I don't think we're in for a civil war, but I do think we are in for probably a period of time that's going to resemble the Troubles in Ireland in the 1980s. Whoa. Just because we're kind of seeing it already. Yeah. There was like a recent, I don't remember the details of it, but there was that LGBT bar that got shot up by a right-wing terrorist recently. I don't remember the details.
I heard about this briefly on Twitter.
Right. Yeah.
Was it like within the last day or two, or
it was within the last like week. I'll say. Okay. Yeah. And it, but then again, it could be another Pulse nightclub situation, a horrible event that might not have anything to do with where it happened. But assuming that it did, that fits the picture, just like the picture that was painted by the fact that some left-wing terrorist tried to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh last year.
Right. Yeah.
Like that was just like, had that happened, then I would have been like, okay.
That would have been insane.
That would have been insane.
So insane. That's the kind of shit that happens in like, you think in like broken, like nations like Latin America and Africa
or Yugoslavia.
Like justices getting murdered outside their homes. Like, didn't that happened? Well, no, down like Ecuador, there have been like a series of assassinations on politicians.
I mean, I haven't heard about it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, there have been like, I think more than one even. Like a woman, like really insane shit.
I mean, it's not comparable because it's a very different system and different events going on, but it's all the Russian oligarchs getting killed constantly. They're all having accidents in hospital windows.
Well, what I've always said on this show, when the Civil War comes up, I always say, I will be joining the team with the guns and the big trucks. So that's who I'm joining. I'm putting that out there.
Well, I have a good historical analog for you guys as a warning, because this will be the moment that I mean, you'll see me again, but I will be hopefully living in Europe somewhere at that point, or Mexico at that point, because this is how bad it could get. If we see something along the lines of Marjorie Taylor Greene marching up to AOC on the floor of Congress and shooting her, it's over. If it's sort of like the caning of Sumter before the Civil War, or not Sumter, that's the fort. Sumner, or fuck,
Charles Sumner.
I'm blanking on the name. The caning of the guy on the congressional floor. I am not doing well with names and details today, but but it's it'll be like that. Charles Sumner, right? Okay, the caning of Sumner. That's the name of the event. Okay, but it'll be something like that. But what that's more akin to is something that happened in Yugoslavia, the kingdom, in 1929, where these divisions between the two major factions of the kingdom, which were the Serbs and the Croats. There's a bunch of other players, namely the Muslims of Bosnia, but a lot of other people involved. But it was the Serbs and the Croats sort of running the show in terms of the fighting that was happening. And it got so bad that one of them assassinated another one and actually ended up killing 2 other people on the floor of their parliament. And right after that happened, a dictatorship was declared.
Sure.
The king of the dictatorship, King Alexander I, was assassinated 5 years later. And then about 6-7 years after that, Nazi Germany came in and partitioned the entire country and probably made things worse for Yugoslavia than they ever possibly could have been until Tito died in the 80s. So basically what I'm saying is, if we're so fractured that we have members of Congress killing each other, it's over. Yeah. At that point, it is going to be balkanization. It's not going to be an even split between North and South. Right. It's just going to be balkanized as fuck, and it's time to get out.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
No, Ben.
Is it? What if you think members of Congress killing each other isn't that big of a deal?
I think. Okay, let me put it this way.
Maybe it's. I'd be kind of cool.
A net positive. I mean, yeah, I would say, like, in terms of who we're talking about, I probably wouldn't be too sad. Right, I mean, like
I get it's bad, but I mean,
it just means that things are going to get a lot worse for everybody who isn't like directly involved with those people. It's like we're all going to bear the brunt of that kind of fighting.
Yeah, the ripple effects. But I mean, verbal Gallic shrug for those just listening.
True. Yes. Yeah. Again, I wouldn't be that. I mean, I would be kind of horrified at like the behavior itself, but the figures involved, I'd be like, you know what? None of you are human to me. So
I'll do a quick thoughts and prayers and move on in my life.
There you go. Oh, okay. So if that happens, let's agree that we'll all coordinate a simultaneous tweet and just say thoughts and prayers, and then I'll pack up my bags and get the hell out of here.
Thoughts and prayers.
Oh man. Somebody sent this to me. It was why you shouldn't invade America.
Yeah.
And it was like, it has a map of the US and it says like the Northeast, people who wear shorts in winter. And then it shows like, New York and New Jersey, and it says gangs. And then it says like, and then like further down south, backwoods people who still know the old ways. And then, in the south, you got rednecks. And then in Florida, you got Florida men and contractors.
Yep. Florida people.
Yep.
And then in San Diego, you got SEALs. LA, you got gangs, and then like the Northwest, it says this part wouldn't be that tough.
No, like just for lulz, I should have put Chaz and Chop.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then Alaska has even the liberals have guns. So.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Also by like balkanization being likely, it's like we don't have an even split of culture here. It's like North and South is not like a thing. I mean, it is a thing, but it's like a holdover thing.
Well, our thing though, like Civil War had racial stuff, and it had like slavery, non-slavery, balkanization. It was like ethnic, right, and religious language. Like here, identity, it's about values, which like that changes from house to house. Well, like I jog around my neighborhood. There's Trump signs, there's Biden signs, there's like all different types of. Like, what are we supposed to do? Just like shoot at each other? Like,
honestly, maybe cities in red states. So it's like the cities that are blue.
We've got you surrounded.
Yeah, maybe we're so atomized that actually will protect us against something. Like
I really think it will. Like,
I hope so. I am inclined towards that view. I'll be honest. I'm just laying out. I'm doing a Peter Zeihan thing where he's like saying that China will collapse in 10 years. He's doing a worst case scenario thing. I'm doing a worst case scenario thing with balkanization happening here. I don't think
the worst thing we could do is like a Greek Turkey style like population swap. Where it's like there used to be a lot of Greeks in Turkey and Turks in Greece, and they swap. So it's like 99% that and 99% that. And it's like that makes the minorities even smaller minorities, and that makes like nationalism even stronger. And I am a nationalist. Like I do consider myself an American nationalist, but that's based on like values and principles, not based on race or religion or language or anything like that. Right. And I'm just like, what's best for like my people, and I mean that is in like American citizens. I don't give a shit. I'm
supportive.
Yeah, mainly my Muslims, mashallah, but like, but just like American. Just Joe. I like Joe. Joe wants to get a shirt that says "Not Italian, just supportive."
It depends on who ends up in power. I guess I'm a nationalist. It's like it depends on how much I'll play up or play down my Jewish background.
Yeah. Are you Jewish?
Like distantly on my father's side. So Jews would not count me among them. But no, I'm descended from German Jews.
Sephardic.
Yeah, I got a little bit of that in me.
Okay, that's
those are fun. Those are like spicy Jews. those
are the Middle Eastern Jews. Yeah.
No, those are the Spanish Portuguese Jews.
Oh, those are the Spanish Portuguese. Okay,
that makes sense then.
The Middle Eastern Jews are the Mizrahi Jews.
Oh, gotcha.
A lot of them because there was this thing called the Inquisition that kicked a lot of them out. A lot of them went to the Middle East and North Africa. and even like into parts of Europe.
I'm annoying Jew, as in Ashkenazi. I'm quoting what's his face, Ari Shafir. I think he was the one who made that delineation. It's like the Ashkenazim are the annoying ones.
It's Ari. What's like, because that's the thing, when you like in America, the vast majority of Jews here are Ashkenazi. But you go to Israel, like the majority are Mizrahi.
Are they the majority there? I thought that the Ashkenazi were the majority. I don't know though.
Okay, maybe not majority. I think it's like all pluralities or something. Right. Basically, it's a lot more. There's even, of course, the kind of fourth group people forget about, like the Ethiopian Jews, like the black Jews, basically. They're obviously a minority, but the Mizrahi.
Don't get Kanye too excited.
I know.
Is he starting to claim he's Ethiopian yet? Did he finally do like the research and find out? It's like, oh, now I can be Jew.
Exactly.
Not all Jew. Be
the full
Jew.
circle.
Yeah, exactly.
No, because in a lot of cities in Spain, like in my small city where I lived, there was like a Jewish neighborhood, and there was just like a menorah and some like just turn some corner, and there's like a menorah there with a sign and all of that, and it was like the old Jewish neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you said a spicy Jew. So do you guys remember when this is a couple years ago, Brett Weinstein, he's Jewish, and he was in some kind of
Twitter.
Kidding. What was that exclusive like chat app? Was it just called like chat rooms or
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse. So he went on that, and it was a group of, I guess, sort of radical black activists. And so he, Brett, he's very like mild mannered, and he wanted to speak up and say something. And then they asked him if he was white. And he goes, well, I don't know if I consider myself white. I don't know if you consider me. I'm Jewish. I don't know. They're like, oh, so a Jew is just a spicy white person.
It's like the least spicy. What do you have you ever had Jewish food? Like, guys, come on. I've been to Passover more than once. It's delicious, but it is not spicy.
And so, I remember that little clip went viral for a bit, where it was just like spicy white person. What are you talking about?
I feel like a spicy white person is just a white Mexican. Like, what else? People don't like. That's the other funny thing too, is when you tell people that there's white people in Mexico. I think Louis C.K. had a joke about that on one of his recent specials, where it was like, it's like, there's a lot of white people in Mexico. They're the majority, if I remember right.
Tom Segura does a joke about that too. He's like, where he like speaks fluent Spanish. And he like looks like he could be like Italian or like basically anything. And they're like, and someone says like, wait, but you're white. He's like, there are white people in like Latin America, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't think this person's ever been to Argentina. I went to Argentina in high school. It's like let's loop it back. It's a lot of, I was gonna say it's a lot of Nazis. It's not a lot of Nazis. That's not fair. But I did hear old people speaking German a couple times, and I was kind of like,
it's a very diverse European country. Like I watch. I'm a big tennis fan. Like one of the tennis players I was watching today is Argentinian. His last name's Schwartzman. But yeah, and then there are ones with Italian last names, Spanish last names.
I hung out in the Italian neighborhood in Buenos Aires. It's like brightly
Italian
colored.
Neighborhood. It's the whole fucking country. It's
like well, sure, yeah, but there's like this big area in Buenos Aires. It's like heavily Italian. And
I grew up with a kid who's Argentinian, spoke Spanish. His last name was Weichelbaum.
No kidding.
Yeah, no, I swear. Actually, Argentina has the 4th largest Jewish population in the world.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
That yes. There's also, isn't there like a surprisingly large amount of South African Jews?
Yeah, I think so. I think South Africa is very diverse. A lot of people don't really think of that.
Yeah.
But it's like us, Israel, France, and they're all leaving France.
Yeah.
And in Argentina.
Yeah. I didn't honestly. I really did not know much about the Jewish diaspora in Argentina. I just knew about the German one, and for obvious reasons, it was.
I followed him. Ah, shit!
It's like a survivor from Auschwitz shows up and is like, "Wait a minute,
what
that guy? Who's that neighbor? Why am I like I could speak with him, but he? Oh man, I don't know how I feel about this. Yeah, yeah. No, that actually, you know what? I'll do a segue here. That is what makes Nazi Germany and the Holocaust unique. There we go.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
No. That was kind of my, I can keep it broader actually, is that I think that what makes the Holocaust such a unique event in, history is because of the relationship held between the Nazis and their conception of Jews. It really was how they did not see a meaningful difference between, the Mizrahi or the Sephardics or the Ashkenazis. No. In fact, they seem to have the most amount of contempt for the Ashkenazis because they were white. They looked like them. And I honestly, this is just me, I'm just making this up, but part of me thinks that the reason why they hated the Ashkenazi Jews so much is because, or the reason why they came up with the whole blonde hair, blue eyed thing is because they realized that if they didn't do that, they couldn't rule out Ashkenazis. Though that brings up the whole fact that Hitler did not look like a typical Aryan either. No. That's always one of my favorite myths is that he was Jewish, but he was not.
Do you think anyone ever pointed that out to him?
Well, we're not going to know.
Was he just colorblind? Was he like?
Yeah, no. I think it's because there really is. That was the point I made in the essay, is that there really was no Nazi state without the Holocaust. Like, what would become the Holocaust? You need, if you're Hitler and you want to create this state based on your vision of the world, you're going to just be putting the seeds in place to have a Holocaust happen. Like, it's just right. Otherwise you would just be fascist Italy, but in German skin. Right. But they had something unique, and that was their weird esoteric beliefs and appreciation of Eastern esotericism and all that, mixed with like an irrational hatred of Jews. And it is kind of funny how it does kind of always go back to the Jews with like radical weirdos.
That's what I always say. That's what I'm.
I don't think that's why you always say it, Ben.
Yeah. I do. I swear. It's like it always leads back to it's like I want to write a book about conspiracy theories. It's like exit stage right at the Jews or something, or like wait, what?
6 degrees of.
It's like it's exit stage right at the Rothschilds. It's like at the Rothschilds. Like,
yep.
Whenever I start hearing the Rothschilds come up, it's like, all right, I'm gonna get out of here because I know where this is going.
This is not my idea. I heard this from what's his name, Michael Moynihan over on the Fifth Column podcast.
Yeah.
And he said, I can't unthink it, but I think within a year, sometime next year, maybe after the election, depending on what happens, Tucker Carlson's going to start making some intonations about Jews. It's just going to, he's going to frame it as, we're not allowed to say it.
Right,
like that's his favorite phrase. We're not allowed to say it. You're fucking saying it, you asshole. Come on.
They don't want you to say.
They don't want you to say. Exactly. Like Yeah, I mean, he already gave Kanye a fair hearing, so.
I want to ask you guys something. What was, because I've seen this debated in numerous places on the internet, but it was like, was the Nazi Party was that left wing or right wing, or was it both, or like the extremes?
They were radical. That's what I'll call them.
I think I actually think they had some like legit left wing kind of principles. And
they were socialists.
It's hard to say, because the problem is that back then, and by back then I mean right after World War I ended, because that's really when it started. Yeah. And you started to see the beginnings of them with like the Freikorps and so forth. Right wing back then meant monarchist. And they were decidedly not monarchist. They were very anti-monarchist. I used to have a quote on hand of what Hitler had to say about monarchy, but it was not good. And they utilized pro-working class rhetoric and were very pro-union on the face of things, which has led people to believe, oh, they were socialists. Yes and no, because at the same time, the Nazis were cutting deals with big corporations. And then by the time they took over, they gutted the trade unions and wanted nothing to do with them. They were very much by modern standards, a right-wing movement, but I wouldn't say that they were left-wing really by any meaningful sense. I would say that the only way you could connect it is maybe with some of their pro-working class rhetoric and the fact that they were anti-monarchist. But being anti-monarchist usually split you into two major camps, which is like nationalist right-wing and socialist left wing, basically.
Right. So what's Christopher Hitchens's brother, the one who's still alive?
Peter Hitchens,
Peter Hitchens. He claimed that the Nazi Party was left wing. I mean, but he's also a very, very conservative British.
And also, I feel like it's just him being butthurt about not being able to argue with his brother anymore. Because Hitch would have totally like decimated him on that point. I would have loved to have watched that point.
I also don't think these things like break evenly or like easily,
right?
But like a lot of like the terms are always changing, right? I don't even like right wing and left wing. Doesn't that come from like the French Republic? Like okay, so it's
the
like
left side of the parliament, the right side.
Of the parliament. Like it's not every single culture is going to break down that way, and those are going to shift. And so I think I think it's more. I don't know. I'm a big fan of more. Like more parties and more coalition creating. And I think people don't like that because sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, it's just always going to be the center left and the center right coming together, or like the centrists and the center right or centrist and center left. I'm like, no, it's actually not true. Like, let's bring up France again. One of my favorite fucking examples of this happened in France recently, like maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, when the like technocrat centrists, like the Macron and Marche party, they voted to keep what I think were very draconian lockdowns in place, when the far right Le Pen side and then the far left Mélenchon side, they actually came together and voted it down and outvoted the centrists to some, like they might have their own reasons for doing it, but the solution's the solution, which was to vote down the lockdowns. I think that's beautiful. Like, I think that's really great. That wouldn't happen in a two-party system, because very, very few times is like are like the Matt Gaetz side and the AOC side going to come together to fix something, even if like a lot of times they might be on the same side of stuff. Like I will agree with Ilhan Omar on some things. I will agree with Matt Gaetz on some things, and like they would agree with each other sometimes, but like they just won't because of the opposite.
I want to give Ilhan Omar a shout out just because I can't let the fact that I'm from her district die. I think I put it in one of my recent essays that I can't not bring this up because I have a connection to the Minnesota's 5th district, like through family and friends and stuff. But you know, like on the one hand, Ilhan Omar is a heinous human being because she, in 2017, before she was famous, so nobody outside of Minnesota knows this, and actually a lot of people in Minnesota don't know this either, because they just want to support her because she's in the squad or whatever. But she voted to I think she was on city council in Minneapolis, but she voted against a harsher criminalization against female genital mutilation, because it was happening a lot in our district because there's a big Somali population there. And it's not because they're Somali, it's because it's a cultural practice there. And she voted against, you know, harsher criminalization of it, which is beyond heinous. to me.
No.
It's disgusting.
But it was only her and Justin Amash who voted in favor in Congress for ending qualified immunity after George Floyd was killed. Yeah, they were the only two who voted for it. Everybody else just abstained or voted against it. And that to me was like one of the few moments I was like, I respect the hell out of Ilhan for that, because that was very isolating to do something like that and to be lumped in with a libertarian. Gross, you know?
This things that have happened. It seems like the media doesn't recover that stuff where it's like, oh, like there's actually kind of a bipartisan, and even if they come together for different reasons. So I remember there was one time it was within the last few years, AOC signed a bill with. I don't know all the details, but she voted in favor of some bill with some conservative. And I think it was about expanding was it birth control for women, but it was like obviously her for feminist reasons, but it's also sort of like, well, this will probably help reduce the need for abortion. So there's kind of like a conservative case for that as well. So it's like, that's interesting. I'll have to look it up, but it was like, see, like this is gonna happen. You know,
well, there's a lot of reactionary impulses, especially on, I'll call them the online progressive wing, like the two online progressive wing of the left. I think there's plenty of great people on the left, but the way to online progressive wing of the left are the ones who love to bring up what you guys are talking about, what we're all talking about, I should say. And they just, when they say they see Le Pen and what's the other guy's name in France? Mélenchon. They come together to vote on something. They're just going to, the two online progressive side of the left is going to just say, oh, so it's a red-brown alliance then. Just invoking, doing a cheap invocation of like communists and fascists coming together.
Oh, yeah.
It's just stupid. It's like, no, maybe they just share certain values on this specific issue, and that's why they're voting a certain way. Like, there's a conspiratorial part of me that's kind of convinced that the reason why we're seeing such a sort of crazed reaction from so-called advocates of LGBT people is because what got same-sex marriage legalized and what got gender identity and sexual orientation protected under whatever Supreme Court case that was in, I think it was early 2021 or late 2021. I don't remember. I think it was late 2021. The principles that got those things done were kind of conservative principles in a sense compared to radical anti-family left-wing principles.
Wait, what case?
I don't remember the name of the case, but the Supreme Court voted in favor of something that basically put the protection, legal protections for gender identity and same-sex attraction as like a means to keep you from getting fired.
Okay.
Yeah, I phrased that badly.
It's like, to me, that's so like
self-evident.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
If
because we're millennials, we were liberals. We are liberals, I think, all of us in our own way from, the era of the 90s and the 2000s.
We want to define it, sure. But like, to me, that's like, if conservatives want to win these arguments, it's like, it's self-evident that people shouldn't be discriminated against off of this shit. Like it's one thing to like compel people to use a pronoun or to like, I don't even know, like make someone use a locker room or participate in sport. Like that's one thing, but like they shouldn't be fired from their fucking jobs based on their identity.
And that's why I think it was kind of a no-brainer that Obergefell v. Hodges turned out the way it did. I think that whatever the case was that I'm referencing about protecting identity and sexuality from being fired, I wish I had it on hand. I can look it up for us in a minute if you want, but it's like these no-brainer cases that maximize individual freedom and dignity. Like that was essentially birthed from what you could by today's standards call right-wing cases. Like Andrew Sullivan, one of my favorite writers, he was a big proponent of gay marriage despite being a conservative Catholic because he himself is gay. And he was at the forefront of the argument saying, we don't want to make your kids gay because that's crazy. We just want to get married and have our own kids and have families. Like that's a very conservative position. From
it would also cut, because if gay marriage wasn't legal, then you would have all this like promiscuity in the
exactly.
So like,
I
mean, those were like a lot of the now the backlash to a lot of this stuff is because it's gone so far in terms of like the messaging. And like I always say, I can't stand the fucking Clintons. I think they're criminals. But one of the smartest things they did was how they promoted or how they kind of marketed abortion was safe, legal, and rare. Safe, legal, and rare was genius.
Yeah.
Like it's all there in those 3 words, not shout your abortion, not taping fetuses to yourself standing outside of a church. Like you're not winning over the hearts and minds that way.
Yeah. And I say, go for it. Like if you want to do that, go for it, but don't act like that is the baseline.
Well, I mean, yeah, of course you can do it, but I'm talking about persuasion here,
right? Exactly.
That persuades people. Same with gay marriage. Like when the arguments became about like, look, we just want the same freedoms you have. We just want to we want to do something very conservative, which is get married and have the same protections and the same rights and potentially raise children and adopt these children that a lot of these straight parents neglected. And left. Like we want to adopt children or maybe keep women, add more parents to the potential pool to keep women from getting an abortion. So it's kind of like you're getting two birds with one stone. Like so that instead maybe they'll have a loving couple to raise the child so that they don't get an abortion because they know they can't raise this child. So it's either abortion or adoption. Like that won people over. But now it's like, no, you have to be okay with us like having our bare ass in the street in
front of your children. And to me, like that doesn't you could maybe say some of these people who are like, doing lewd things while children are present are like kind of being creeps for doing so. But I'm more just thinking, why are a bunch of like, just to use the terminology of the day, cis straight parents trundling their kids in front of this stuff when it's clearly not meant for kids? Like that says more about the parents than anything.
Well, I think so I've always said, I think, for instance, in the same vein, what's it? The what are they called? The not trans. I keep wanting to say trans, not trans.
The drag.
Drag queen story hour.
Sure.
Totally. I think it should be legal.
Yeah.
However, it is the biggest virtue signal on the planet.
Absolutely.
Like if you are a straight parent, bring your child, you are solely doing it so that you can post it on social media. Yeah, you're one of the good ones and brought your child to drag queen story out. Doesn't mean I think it should be illegal at all. I think it's totally. I think the drag strip shows that are child friendly should be illegal. That's totally different.
That's a very I always say this.
Thing, if that woman wasn't trans, would it be okay? No, it fucking wouldn't to have her twerking in front of a 5-year-old. Right. But so 2 different things. The same thing with these parades are that it's for the social credit with their group. Now, the other side is, they are promoted as child friendly. Maybe the parents don't know, and they do actually believe that they're child friendly. I don't know. Maybe it's giving them too much credit. It's like, hey, I just maybe my friend is in this show. Maybe my cousin's in this parade, and it says child friendly, so I'll do it. I guess you could do your research, but I think there's that side of it too. It's like maybe they honestly thought it was just like, hey, there's cousin Rob with the flag. Could say hi, Rob. Like we're just supportive, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But then they ride by butt naked.
Yeah,
because you can do that in some.
I used to go. I'm from Minneapolis. It's about as woke of a city as it gets, especially nowadays. But I was going to pride parades when I think the first pride parade I went to, I was 9 or something like that.
Wow, yeah.
It was like this is also the 90s, so it's it was mundane. It was just floats and local business sponsorships and churches and stuff like that. Yeah. It was basically what it is meant to be, which is pride in yourself, like being who you are and all that stuff. And by the way, the Supreme Court decision I was talking about, I looked it up. I think it's there's 3 cases actually: Altitude Express Inc. versus Zarda, Bostock v. Clayton County, Georgia. I think that's the big one. And RG and GR Harris Funeral Homes Inc. v. Equal Employment and Opportunity Commission. And this was on June 15th, 2020. They issued a landmark 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court did, affirming that the prohibition on sex discrimination in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 extends to discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So from a legal perspective, kind of sort of everything is good.
Well, do you know what that decision was?
No, I don't know the details beyond what I just said.
No, like the vote.
Oh, like who made the decision?
Like, was it 9-0 decision?
Or? 6-3. Sorry, I didn't say that loud enough.
It was 6-3.
Yeah. So, and I think Amy Coney Barrett was not on the bench yet, right? But I mean, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, the most evil men in the world, remember, like back in like 2017, 2018, they were the worst human beings on the planet. I get the feeling Gorsuch probably voted in favor of that. He seems to be pretty good on like civil libertarian stuff. But my point is just that, like, you know, I'm not saying that you can't be vigilant for discrimination, but the law is now literally on your side. If you're in a marginalized group, it is on your side. And I know that suing is not easy. I know that resources are difficult and all that stuff, but it's just this, there's this idea out there, and I'm actually getting commissioned to write a piece for Queer Majority about this. There are people who think that gay people don't have rights, at least online. These are mostly probably Zoomers, honestly. They just don't know. But like, again, Obergefell v. Hodges was like almost 10 years ago. Like, that's a big deal. And I just think that there needs to, I mean, I guess you could make the argument, as I think the Biden administration has, that they want to make make legislation for it. I guess that would be fine, but do they have to? Like, legally speaking?
Well, I think after Dobbs, like,
right,
you know, why not at this point?
But the thing is that abortion, okay, well, most Americans are pro-choice when it comes to specific instances. If we're talking about rape and incest, it's like 90% of Americans are in favor of abortion in that case. I don't know what the actual number is, but it's a vast majority. The thing is, identifying as pro-life versus pro-choice has not changed in 50 years. Roe v. Wade did nothing to change that. It was a terrible idea to try to protect reproductive rights or bodily autonomy via a case, I would think. So I would think that that's a separate situation than something like same-sex marriage or gender affirmation, because those things, gender affirmation is a little more complicated now because of the backlash you're talking about, and actually the backlash has reached, unfortunately, same-sex marriage and same-sex relationship approval, which was 71% in 2021, and I believe went down to 67% in 2022. I might be getting the years wrong, but it's gone down. I wrote a piece about that actually as well. And I think it's a reaction against the sort of craziness, but I think it's also an element of some mask off bigotry that's been going on the right with figures like Matt Walsh and so forth. But yeah, like, I guess my point is just that I feel like there is this idea that things are way more dire than they actually are with people on the left right now. And it's kind of creating a reactionary impulse against like stuff that was what got the gains that people are taking for granted now. Like I said, the conservative case for gay marriage is what got us gay marriage. I would make that argument. I don't know about the gender identity thing, but I assume that's more of a civil libertarian kind of thing. Like, why would you deny someone a job if they don't identify with their birth sex? Like, that is kind of silly. Why would you deny them that job? Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. I suppose we kind of have a natural segue into the other thing I wrote. If you guys want to talk about that.
Good. We're at an hour and a half. Why don't we save that for another episode?
Let's do it.
I know you're busy with grad school and your own writings and pods.
Sure.
But is that cool?
That's perfectly fine, especially but if you guys don't have anything going on, I do have more time. So it's up to you guys.
Let's do another episode because we always need topics. Is that cool, Joe?
Yeah.
I mean, affirmative action is a thick topic.
I think that's why
I think we can do like
for it.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
I like how we bounced around a lot on this one.
Well, yeah, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. And
no problem.
So why don't you let our audience know what your name is? And
I was going to say
we didn't do like a proper introduction.
That's true. Yeah. For those who didn't see me last time, I'm Alex von Sternberg. Alexander von Sternberg is the pen name because I got to be a little pretentious. I write for Queer Majority, which is like this classically liberal publication that writes about gender and sexuality issues as well as history. I kind of on the history beat for them. I write a Substack and produce a podcast under the same name, which is History Impossible. Obviously, I have a bit of a fixation on the Third Reich. And I'm soon to be releasing a new episode that is probably going to be the most graphically violent and unpleasant episode I've ever done. And that's saying something.
Whoa. So,
yeah, people can just check out History Impossible over on just Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's there. It's easy to find. And the Substack is just historyimpossible.substack.com. And if you like my work, find me on Patreon. That also helps. So yeah,
Us too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, we're podcasters here, guys. We're not making it rain, okay?
Well, we always forget to promote our own stuff. So we have a podcast, not podcast. We have a Patreon also. Check it out.
Yeah.
Listen to our podcast.
Listen to our podcast on our podcast.
But yes, don't go on Substack though, because Elon Musk apparently hates me now because I'm on Substack.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
with Matt Taibbi.
Stupid war. It's dumb, but yeah. So yeah, please, everybody, support podcasts, support podcasters.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, dude.
Sure.
It's always a blast. We love chatting with you, and let's do it again soon, man. We got there's no shortage of shit for us to talk about. So
yeah, and who knows what I'll have written by then too. We might have other stuff to talk about too.
Yeah, man.
So yeah.
All right. Well, stay reckless, everybody.
Reckless, Alex.
Reckless. I love that. Stay reckless. I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah, well, because Ben and I, when we were first talking about this, we were like, hey, like maybe it should be like a Wayne's World sort of thing, like party on Wayne, party on Garth, sort of like some kind of sign off thing.
Stay reckless, Joe.
Stay reckless, everybody.